We recently covered a video where HIKO really dug into Riot about Killjoy and its balance and compared the direction of Valorant akin to Overwatch with spam damage, potential shields, and more healing. Now, Big Boss Morello claps back pretty hard here and also answers a ton of questions in a Q&A for us about Sage and Cypher Nerfs, Viper buffs, and we even have more info about hit regs and other important information in Ask Valorant number 4. So let's break it all down real quick, and if you like the videos, clap that subscribe button, but let's just jump right into it, shall we? Now, right off the bat, let's talk about the rant from HIKO. And if you don't remember the rant from HIKO, HIKO really criticized the addition of Killjoy and basically more trash damage, or abilities that do damage and can get kills by themselves. Now, at the time, he didn't know the damage numbers, but still, he related Valorant in the same direction as Overwatch, saying if you're gonna block off all this damage, that you're gonna need shields and tons of healers and all sorts of things. And he really compared Killjoy to something like Torbjorn. And actually, Morello surprised me here. He clapped back hard. He said he likes HIKO, he's a good guy, but he did state, quote, he says some boneheaded things sometimes, end quote. And the point he makes here is that shields in Overwatch is to stop damage coming at a constant rate. They have shields to block giant amounts of damage, but in Valorant, there is no permanent healers. There is no permanent sustain. If you take a whole bunch of damage, you just die, and that is fine. So the way that you actually take space is not through sustain and pushing up and constant healing. It's through checking your angles, smoking off sightlines, and this is all fine, and that's still the case with Killjoy. He even goes on to state that Killjoy was in the game far before Breach was, and that Breach might have been released earlier, but Killjoy has been played behind the scenes for a long time, and it doesn't create any bit what he's talking about. And Morello states that HIKO is comparing or equating the two when there's very few similarities. Just because it's a turret doesn't mean the game is like each other in hardly any way at all. And Morello further talks about CSGO purist players and that Valorant is not trying to appeal to CSGO purists. Valorant is a game that will try things that didn't work in CS because it's not the same game. And just because something didn't work in CS, that doesn't mean they're not going to put it in Valorant. And just because something worked in CS also doesn't mean it's going to be in Valorant. And that's a really important takeaway from this entire discussion, is that Morello really is making Valorant its own game. Just because it's similar to CS does not mean that it will always follow in its footsteps at all. Now, moving on to some more rapid fire question and answers. There was a question about Sage nerfs still happening, and Morello says yes, Sage nerfs will be happening, but it will not necessarily be changing or slashing a number, but will probably take power from one area of her kit and put it into another. So that's just something to think about. You don't have to worry about barrier just becoming more and more expensive or have less and less health. Things like that are probably not going to happen. Now, there was another question about one-way smokes. What are Morello and the Riot team's thoughts on them? And Morello says that they are okay with them, but they want to make sure that smokes are used in a lot other ways and that one-way smokes aren't used overly much. So basically, they're fine in some scenarios, but they just don't want everyone to be using one-way smokes. Now, the second thing is about Viper buffs, and he did say that Viper is most likely going to be buffed more, but he already knew that during testing. But what he wanted to do is actually buff her slowly instead of buffing her too much, making her too powerful. They would rather buff her in small chunks, even though they thought she was already underpowered with the buffs that already came out. Now, another question came up about the op meta in general. A lot of people have been complaining about the op meta, and Morello had a really specific take on this. People said that they can never peek an opper with the Vandal and win the duel, and he says that this is 100% intentional. He wants people to flush oppers out with smokes, routing, flashes, all sorts of things. It is intentional the way it is, and I think that from the tournament of Sentinels up against TSM, we are finding that there's more and more ways to counter ops, and if we would have nerfed ops back then, it probably would have been too heavy-handed, and I do like Morello's take here. Now, there was another thing about removing Sage's self-heal, and Morello himself really wanted it out of the game. He did not like the fact that Sage could self-heal, and if you didn't see Mitch or Sick, which were the two finals from C9 and Sentinels, the Sage often, after they used all their utility, would take the lurker role and be really aggressive, and they would use that Sage self-heal to allow them to do so. And in Morello's opinion, duelists should have the highest form of self-healing, while characters like Sage should not have any self-healing at all. So if it was up to Morello, it would be completely out of the character, but that's not the opinion of everyone on the development team, so it might change, it might not, but this is something they're looking at for sure. There was another question later on about how they manage 2 agents, and what they want to specifically do is make it so that every agent is good at one particular thing, and no agents overlap too much. They said that they specifically nerfed Cypher Cage's slow because they didn't want Cypher to be a stalling agent like Sage is. And they also are afraid of both Killjoy and Cypher having similar play patterns, so they will nerf whatever each character is good at and make the other character really good at a different aspect. Like whether it's one of them is side holding, one of them is map control, or whatever, they would rather have characters be good at different things. Now, I am interested in this, and I do like their take on this, and it seems pretty feasible now, but at 6 characters a year, how in 5 years from now, I don't even know if this is going to be possible to have every single character good at something. There's going to be some characters that are just going to be automatically better than others, and there's only so many different things that characters can do. So I'm interested in this philosophy. I don't know if they can make it work for 4 or 5 years down the line. Now, next question was talking about tournaments and tournament pick rate. They said that specifically Breach's pick rate surprised them, and if you don't remember, Breach had the bottom 3 lowest pick rates, which is really interesting because a lot of people thought that Breach was really good on all the tier list, and before these recent tournaments, Breach was seeing quite a bit of play, and people thought he was far and away the best flasher, but it's not turning out to be that way, and I think it's just because Breach is way too predictable. He's way too obvious. He can't lurk. His flashes are easy to 180 juke, and he's really only good at one thing, which is forcing people out of corners, so I am not really that surprised that Breach is not seeing that much play, especially with the way that the meta has evolved around lurking, flashing out of smokes, and things like that. There was another question about just a classic flashbang, just like the flashbang in CS, and Morello specifically stated that that is the most powerful flashbang that exists, and he says that he likes to make the flashes a little bit different from one another instead of having one far and away the best, and he says if he makes any flashes just like that, they will be too powerful, and it will be really hard to make any flashes that are not that powerful. And basically, he doesn't want to add it to the game because it would just be far and away the best flash. Now, there's another question about another healer in the game. This one's pretty straightforward. Yes, there will be future healers in the game. We pretty much already knew this, but he does think that Sage's pick rate is inflated due to the fact that she is the only team heal character. So there was another question here about Cypher Nerfs, and they actually have some interesting Cypher Nerfs that they are going to do that maybe not might be direct nerfs, or they might be tricky nerfs. We don't know the full information about that, but they will be followed up with Sage nerfs and actually Breach buffs. So look out for those. There's going to be several big changes in 1.05 that you should look forward to. Now, moving on to Ask Valorant number 4. This is a few things that we have to cover really quickly. And if you don't know, Ask Valorant is just question and answers from the community. The first one is, have they considered an option to disable the special animations / sound effects of gun skins because they can be distracting even if they're nice and pretty? Some of the effects can be distracting and things like that. Well, they considered this a lot before launch, and something they want to do is they want to make it so that if you have like a higher level, you can actually tone it down or toggle it down to a lower level of a weapon. So if you have like a level 4 Elder Flame, you can toggle it down if it's distracting. So that's something that should be implemented sometime soon, and they're looking into it. Now, the next thing is they're talking about lore just in general. When will we get more lore? And they did say that we're going to get some more lore in the new event when Killjoy gets launched. However, they want to work on the competitive experience before they work on any lore, which is probably something that most of us can agree with. That being said, the lore in this game is really cool, and it would be awesome to see more, but gameplay comes first. Now, the next question was about agent-specific keybinds, and it's on a very high priority list from them. They're already working on this feature, but they don't know when it will come out, even though this is something that we absolutely need. Every single character has like some special nuance that you would like to assign, change, and this is going to be really cool to have custom character keybinds. Now, the last thing is about the crouching and hitbox manipulation thing. Sometimes people would crouch and it would look like you headshot them, but it didn't connect, and there was all these problems with hit regs and things like that. But they did fix the hit registration bug that caused by crouch synchronization in a previous patch. However, they still understand that there could still be some visual uncertainty. So if it looked like a headshot, in actuality, it wasn't a headshot. It just didn't register correctly. So that's something they're still trying to work on. But as far as you actually hitting a headshot and it not registering, that is no longer the case. Anyways, I think this wraps up all the news for now, but I want to ask you, what do you think? Do you think that Cypher should be nerfed? It has some of the highest pick rate, but do you think that it's fine the way it is? How do you think they should nerf Sage? What buffs do you think Breach and Viper are gonna get? Definitely let me know in the comments down below, and like and subscribe. Do us a big favor here and get us to 80K subscribers. But that's all I got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.